It's time. I know it's time. The generation for reparation. Pay up, time to pay up. Reparation. Right now, reparation. Especially ours, you know it's due. Pay up, time to pay up. Right now, reparation. Pay up, time to pay up. Yeah. Right now, reparation. Time for reparation. Right now, time for reparation. Time for reparation. Right now, time for reparation. Reparations for building this nation. Lynching and burning castration. Selling children, family separation. Right now, time for reparation. Millions of slave ships landed, whipped, chained, and branded. 300 years of free labor. We ain't asking for no favor. Time to pay. Right now, time for reparation. Time for reparation. Right now, time for reparation. Pay up, time to pay up. Right now, reparation. Pay up, time to pay up. Right now, reparation. Reparations for reconstruction. Red summers of destruction. Segregation, Jim Crow corruption. Right now, time for reparation. Reparations for the Constitution. Said we were 3/5 human. Reparations are overdue. 40 acres and some new. Time for reparation. Right now, time for reparation. Time for reparation. Right now, time for reparation. Pay up, time to pay up. Right now, reparation. Pay up, time to pay up. Right now, time for reparation. Time for reparation. Right now, time for reparation. Pay up, time to pay up. Right now, reparation. Pay up, time to pay up. Right
I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along. I see my colleague, Shirley LaChapelle. Shirley, I almost called you what I called you privately, boss lady. Shirley LaChapelle. But that is a compliment to the fierceness of your spirit and your history of accomplishment, of tackling issues, ideas, projects, and making them happen like a boss. So thank you for being here, Shirley. And how are you doing?
I am doing good, Al.
Great. Well,
Very good.
This is the Healing Circle. We are here in association with the African American Child Wellness Institute. And our mission every Friday is to create a conversation, a table where we talk about healing, about African American child wellness, family wellness, and to do that through the lens of understanding and promoting mental health, recognizing the professional capability of the resources in our community, encouraging us to look to each other and look to the talent, to the genius of our own people in seeking healing, but also in discovering the healer in ourselves, to make healing our business and healing our practice the basis for our relationships with one another, and a business that we all can benefit from and profit from. So we do that in this conversation, talk about what it is to be healed, how we do healing, and what are the economics of healing, what is the psychological benefit of healing, and how we have to assume responsibility and do this work with a sense of accountability in the belief that we are the ones we've been looking for. We are owners, not only of the problem, but of the solution as well. So I'm pleased to have Dr. Oliver Williams and Dr. Bravada Garrett Akinsanya on board. Dr. Akinsanya, the principal at the African American Child Wellness Institute and the leader of this initiative, but Dr. Williams and Shirley LaChapelle as advocates, as force leaders of doers in this work. We're glad to all be here. Dr. B, let me have the pass the talking stick to you. Before I do that, though, each time we do this program, I send out notices, invitations to people in my, I guess my pages that I'm associated with, or pages that I like. So I want to invite everybody else to do that. But among them are people in two groups I belong to called the Sykes Family and the Sykes Family 1000. And what I want to say, if any of the Sykeses have been watching the program or checked in, join me. The Sykeses are my maternal line. My mom's family are the Sykes family. They're from Mississippi. And there's a gazillion Sykeses, right? And I know a few of them, but I know about the character and the energy and the grit that the Sykeses represent out of Mississippi and out of North Carolina before they got to Mississippi, and obviously all of us out of Africa. And then I also send to two groups of McFarlanes, including a cousin that I've never met in Jamaica, named Sergeant Ray McFarlane. He's a retired military guy, but I see him on the Facebook channel every now and then, so I'm reaching out to him directly. Ray, I'd like to figure out how we engage as many as possible in our family line in this healing process, in this conversation. And with that, I want to say and invite everybody else who's listening to share this conversation with your networks, with your people, your friends, your professional colleagues, and invite people to weigh in, to post comments, and to provide criticism, to provide correction when it's appropriate, but to do it in the spirit of this is how we build towards a future that is sustainable and that supports and gives life to us and to the world. With that, Dr. B, good afternoon. I'm passing the talking stick to you.
Thank you so much. I received that talking stick.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm hearing a little echo, so I want to make sure that. Okay, what I wanted to say is I'm glad to be here today. As usual, we have very, very powerful conversations, and the vision for the Healing Circle is really based on one of our first shows that we did, where we talked about the African-centered wellness model. And in that model, we talk about the Afrocentric values that many people equate with Kwanzaa. Those are called the Nguzo Saba, the 7 principles. And in addition to that, we added one about academic and intellectual wellness, since that's a place where we are used to cut out of, and where our kids and our families are often victimized in the space of education. So that's why I added that to the model. So today, as we talk about the policies and the politics and the abuses of power that we endure as a people, it's important for us to understand that those abuses happen in multifaceted ways. They're very insidious, they're constant, and in a way, we as Black folks have normalized the abusive conditions in which we have to live. So I want to just elevate that discussion and give us an opportunity to see what are some ways we can change that power grab that's in our society and the policies that hurt and harm us, and how we can take our power back, and that really never left but was abused and stolen from us, but regain our sense of power, our sense of humanity, our sense of capacity, and recognize the greatness that we exhibit every single day. So that's what I'm hoping will happen during this conversation.
So,
And
Dr. B, why don't you then establish a theme, a title for today's conversation, and we'll all react to that. And before you do, I want to acknowledge the presence of one of my childhood friends who is with me every Thursday, retired attorney, Kamal King, was corporate counsel for the Coca-Cola Corporation. And I've invited him to come by any of the programs whenever he's available to. And I see him here. Kamal, good to see you. Meet my friends and some powerful forces here in the Minneapolis Twin Cities area.
Okay. Hello, Sherilyn and Bravina and Yili and Oliver. I was Al. Sorry to disappoint you, but I was just checking in to listen.
Okay.
Okay.
No problem.
All right.
That's fine. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
So,
and thank you for doing that, Kamal. Dr. B, go ahead.
I was going to say at that point, I was going to say, brother, I don't know if listening is an option any longer. You showed up. So anyway, so one of the things I'd like to talk about is, again, reiterating that we need to adhere to some changes that need to happen in our community. And today's title for our show today is Politics is Power. Our involvement in the political process to promote policies that save our lives. Politics is power. So there we go. That's what we're going to be talking about. I'm sticking to it.
All right. I love it.
So with that, would you like for me to take a talking stick and pass it to Brother Oliver Williams?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
There you go, Brother Oliver. Your response to that title and where you're coming from with it.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'll give it a shot. To me, I do think that politics can be power, but it also can be an erosion of power for some communities. And I think it depends on how you use it in the right way. I have to take a look at how there have been some people who've been heroes and sheroes in the community who've used power, politics as a way to be able to gain a foothold to try to address challenges that we've had in the community. But I think it also has something to do with the wisdom of the people who are trying to employ power, and also the pushback that they may get, with resistance of folks around it as well. So I would say the skill set of the people who are employing the power is something that's important. And I also think the support that they get from various sources in their realm also influences that too. So it doesn't come just because you are who you are. It has something to do with the network that you're connected with, So that's what I think.
So thank you so much. Can we pass that talking stick to Sherilyn LaChapelle?
Well, thank you. Of course, those who know me know I am very much involved in politics. Mm-hmm. And I see politics as a vehicle. All politics is local, but it's also national. But if we can't control what happens here where we live, controlling things nationally becomes even more kind of uncertain. As we look around the United States, we see what's happening in all the state legislatures, how they are working to disenfranchise their voters, how they're working to even, if they haven't touched the voting laws, they are moving to gerrymandered districts so they dilute the power of the community. And this being said, a lot of that's our own fault. When I talk to people in the community, I said, we got to vote. We got to, well, it doesn't do any good. I said, with that attitude, you're right. But when they start taking away things that you need because you were silent, then what are you going to do? It's too late at that point. Our power is in our numbers. Our power is in putting people in office who will do what's good for the community, also moving them out. Well, I disagree with California's method of having recall elections. I agree with it as well. A lot of those recall elections don't make sense and it wastes a lot of money. But we should have it at the national level for sure. We've got politicians who go there to do nothing more than take up space and fight with the opposition instead of doing the work that they were elected to do. And that's the will of the people, to improve the lives of the people and not to take political donations from corporations and other wealthy people, which dilutes our power. It takes away our power. And as far as state legislatures, maybe we should have them, but with good reason, a recall to remove those people who are not doing their job. So that's all from me. Dr. B, it's back to you. You're in charge.
Thank you so much. I would like to pass the talking stick to Yeliak and Sonia.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. And
Yeli, unmute yourself and
good afternoon, everybody. And if you are listening to this, I'm going to take us through some political science elementaries today. And I'll tell a small story for the next 90 seconds, and I'll go back to my political 101. When I was working on a doctoral degree in the 80s, in the mid 80s, in political science, for sure, I remember I used to have this class. You know, all graduate assistants were, Oliver, you recognize this, and Dr. B, you recognize this, since both of you are doctors and you recognize this in your political science or social science and in your departments, that graduate assistants who are PhD students are required to teach classes just like full-time professors. So, as I was required to teach 3 classes per week. And I remember political science 101, this kid, I'm calling him a kid now, he's probably about 47 years old now. So he would tell me that, Mr. Akison, you are a socialist. What you tell us about politics is not true. One of the textbooks that we're using, actually the only textbook we're using that was prescribed for us, the title was The Irony of Democracy. Please, I really want you to think about that. When people talk about democracy, democracy is not the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. It's never been. It's the government of the rich, for the rich, and by the rich. The people who put money up to grease the hands of these politicians, those are the people that the politicians listen to. So we gave these kids, we gave them an assignment as part of their grade for the term. They had to observe political activities in their county or in their local areas. So the guy who was telling me a socialist, at the end of the semester, he comes into the class and wobbles into my office. We were 2 graduate assistants in each room, and he says, Mr. Akison, can I talk to you? So I asked him, I said, do you want my roommate to get out so that we can have this? He said, no, Mr. Luma can stay. So I said, so what is on your mind? I said, do you want to call me another name? And I said, no, I'm not calling you any name. He said, you remember when you gave us this assignment at the beginning of the semester and I called you a socialist? I said, yeah. So that's when I asked him, what do you want to call me now? I'm not calling you anything. He said, the chairman, the president or the CEO of the utility company in their county rules the county. I'm like, what do you mean by he rules the county? He said, because he gives political contribution to all the commissioners. So when he tells the commissioners do this, they ask him, how well do you want us to do? They didn't even question him. So their utility rates are very high because he told them to charge higher rates. He tells them, I want to do this to the customers. They just do it. And so he said, man, politics is such a terrible thing there. You know, all those politicians are crooked and that. I just sat down there. I'm not an emotional guy. I got so emotional that now that's what we wanted them to learn. That at the end of the year, if they can get to that level of understanding of what politics really was, then we will have already achieved our goal. Fortunately for this guy, he got an A in the class, of course. But today, what Sherilyn was saying is not only true, it's not only practical, that's our reality. If you cannot recognize politics as the allocation of resources And that allocation of resources goes to the point of who gets what, when, why, and how. Then you're losing the point. I think we're doing better. If you look at what happened in Georgia during the last election, it truly proves the point that politics is allocation of resources. When Black people and minority people, the young people came out to vote en masse, we exercised our right to vote, we made a change. If it wasn't because of Georgia, we will all be in trouble today. America will be in trouble, period. That's what got us to 50 senators. And that's why Vice President Kamala Harris will be the president of the Senate. So if you think participating in politics is not real, you need to think twice. It's who gets what and when. So if you don't, I know Sherilyn, with our Saturday, you've been talking about, we need to get involved with all the politicians. We need to get involved with. That's not only true. That's the only way to make people do what you want them to do, especially when they know you have an impact on whether they stay in office or not. Yeah. They are bound to listen to you. My last comment, this round. So the people who claim to support all these activities in the neighborhood or in the community about who are supporting the Black community or BIPOC community, we need to take them to task. They cannot be saying they are for this, they are for that. We need to make them do it. And if they don't want to do it, we need to call them out. And when we call them out, we need to replace them with somebody who would do it. So I'll stop at that point for now.
Dr. B, can I say one thing? Because you know how Yelly gets me going. Yes, they need to be replaced. Thank you, Yelly. They need to be replaced now. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me? Okay. Yelly, put your hearing aid in. Anyway. He hears after I say that. They need to be replaced. For many years in the Black community, I use the term, and those who know me, all the usual suspects, have been getting millions and millions and millions of dollars. And guess what? Nothing has changed in our community. Mm-hmm. And then you ask yourself, why do the governors, the mayors, and all those people continue to give those people the money?
Yes.
Because they really don't want change. So when the community says, well, we need money for these things to help our community, and they said, well, I gave it to who are all the usual suspects, and nothing has changed. Well, they knew they weren't going to do anything but keep the money and squander it on themselves and their little pet projects and enrich themselves. So ask yourself, why do we continue to silently allow these people to continue to go down to the Capitol, stand up there like they're helping, unchallenged, and continue to get the money? But I know they hate my guts, but that's all right. I live on hate.
Thank you, Sister Sherilyn, for shaming the devil. I'm going to pass the talking stick to Brother Al.
Great, thank you. I think this is a great conversation, and I want to tie it to two things. One is the question of wealth creation and wealth and health. What's the relationship between wealth and health and wealth? How do you arrive at a people who have tapped into, who are attuned to, and who reflect what I call their natural selves and their potential, because they move with confidence in their knowledge of who they are and in their appreciation, their joy of being in the world and taking on the world, not with a sense of fear or trepidation, but with a sense of excitement and wonder. How do you create a people and become a people that epitomize what freedom means, what intelligence and genius means, what opportunity means, whose very walk and talk are symbols of the potential that we possess as human beings? So I'm taken back to, I can't remember the lectures I heard or the which of the philosophers, where either Plinius or Herodotus, a Greek philosopher visiting Africa, wrote with amazement, I've never seen a race of philosophers, the way they talk every day, what they think about, the level of their engagement reflects and personifies what we talk about when we talk about philosophical thought. So how did he discover a people whose language, whose engagement, whose interactions, and whose normalcy were reflection of the highest level of thinking, in his description, that of trained philosophical engagement and thought. So how do we get back to that? How do we get to that so that how we live reflects a union of thought, of imagination, of seeing and living our dream world, and the ability to weave reality out of what we dream and what we imagine, and what we can therefore manifest in our daily routine and in lifestyles. And one of the modalities of that, I believe, and Shirlene is a witness, is political engagement. How do we bring ourselves to the table of decision? The table of decision is the place of politics, meaning this is where you decide how the money gets spent. Where the money resides is the language I've heard on social media. So how do we put ourselves with intention where the money resides and take ownership of our share, of our shared responsibility and authority, our sovereignty, in a way that we know and we feel our interests are part of the equation in the creation of the future, period. So politics is critical, and absent a political strategy, a process for political engagement, you continue this idea of powerlessness and marginalization. And the danger is to accept that it's okay to be powerless, that it's okay to be marginalized or to be discounted because you have embraced that condition. And that condition, we know, is artificial. It's imposed. And sometimes we, out of the incessant presentation of narratives that show us and want us to believe that we are powerless, we embrace that message, and then we carry out the act. We are like the elephant that is chained to a pole and walks a circle for 10, 12 years. Then you remove the chain and the elephant still walks around the pole. He's been trained to do that, the Pavlovian response, right? So my thing is, how do we and when do we begin to use the knowledge we have to program ourselves differently and to program ourselves for the victory that ought to be part of our every breath? I'm going to pass the talking stick back to Dr. Oliver Williams. Doctor, what do you think?
You know, I agree with what you said, Al, in the entire conversation so far. The one thing I wonder about is, could we get more people to be involved in the process if they understood the process? You know, if they understood, you know, who the usual suspects are. And sometimes I've wondered over the period of time that I've been in Minnesota, whether, living in different places, one of the things that I've noticed is that there are different folks that have access to the decision makers. And does everybody have access to those decision makers? And then the other question is, are they talking to each other? Are we talking collectively among ourselves? Or are there some people that have access to those decision makers based on history of their relationships with them, rather than expanding it to newer voices and getting other inputs? And so the question is, how do you negotiate that? And the other thing is, which approaches do we use to have our voices heard? There's some people who use old methods that have worked for them for years to get access to decision makers or funders to listen to them. Should those methods change? Is a question that I have. And do they not change because, people may not know how to do it differently, and they rely on the old ways because that's what's worked for them in the past. So the question is, how do you get more voices in? How do you have people collectively discuss things with each other rather than minimize, other people's voices, and because they have the access to people that can make decisions, those voices are taken more forward rather than maybe different voices. And how do we make the decisions about that? I remember when I was a young man, I listened to Andrew Young have a conversation about young people taking leadership, and that we should hand the leadership over to these young people. And then and Andrew said that power isn't given, it's taken. And so the question that I have about that is then how should we think about it? Is that the way that we want to think about it collectively? Or and I understand the idea of the struggle, and that there are people that have to be able to come through it somehow, and that maybe you don't want to just give it to someone. Just like the political process of going, people through the presidency, who's going to become the person that's going to run for a particular party. But there is something about having a conversation about that. How do we think about how do we approach it? How do we make decisions about it? But then also, how do we prepare people to take on the role and responsibilities of it? So that's what I wonder. So I guess I'm going to pass the talking stick to Dr. B.
Thank you, because I was sure trying to get it. I'm excited because I think what I'm hearing from you is something that we all have thought about, but I don't think we've articulated it or spoken it out loud. And that, I think it hinges on a number of factors. One of which is, can we trust each other? Can we trust each other? I keep thinking about that movie Django Unchained, and I think about how when Black folks, still to this day, when we affiliate with white folks, immediately the other Black folks are going to think you're trying to sell out. Mm-hmm. So even though you're authentic with them and they thought you're good, but as soon as you start hanging with white folks, your street creds start going down. And we think about the Tuskegee syphilis study. They didn't use a white man to interface between those Black folks with syphilis. They used a Black woman nurse. Yep. So they used us in that capacity. And like I keep saying in Carter G. Woodson, Miseducation of the Negro, when we work with white folks, they do the operating and Black folks do the going. So we have to learn that one of the key things is that presence doesn't mean power, and that politics, as Yelly said earlier, is the allocation of resources. So even if you're present and you can't speak up for your group, even if you're present and you can't sway the room to understand what you're all about and what your needs are, because they don't really care. If you can't do that, then the power that determines whether we wear a mask or not during COVID, the power that determines that I can't tell you whether or not to wear a mask, although you're breathing that same air I am, and I could die because you have COVID and you don't have on a mask because that's your rights. And yet I'm a woman and you have the right to come in my womb and force me to have a baby I don't want to have. It's something crazy about real cognitive dissonance is existing. And I think there has to be a lot of psychological acrobatics in people's heads in order to have those two divergent perspectives living simultaneously. Just like in slavery, the divergence of perspectives. We were what, 5/8 human, and yet they come in at night and have sex with us. Does that mean that they were engaged in bestiality and then go to church on Sunday? All of those conflictual perspectives are what I see, or even my brother Naeem Akbar would say, this is psychological sickness. And when we drink that Kool-Aid, we get sick too. So I'm going to pass the talking stick to Mr. Akinsanya and see what he can say about it, because I know he's got something to say.
I'm going to jump on, or at least add to what Dr.
Wait a minute, they can't hear you because you're.
Yeah. I'm going to add to what Dr. Oliver said. He was talking about the allocation of resources, whether you are present or not. But when you are present, how do you marshal those resources to improve the lives of people in the community? I know I'm paraphrasing you, Dr. Oliver. Okay, please just excuse me. But what I'm getting from what you said is this: there are some of us in the community that have been endowed with certain resources and certain talent and certain skills. Okay, we know how to engage with the political elites, if you want to call them that. We know how to make things happen in the society. I'm not the type of person that I want to shout on top of my voice and go on and tell people how crazy they are. I'm all about creating wealth in the Black community. And how do we do that? There are several ways we can do that. I'm not going to talk about the projects or the activities that we can do, but the point is this: we need to be able to marshal the resources that we have access to, or that we can have access to, or that are available for us to access to improve the community. The best way to do that, from my own vantage point, is to help people in the community gain wealth. I remember in the 80s, the 2000s, and surely you remember this, and Mr. McFarlane, you remember this. So with Dr. B and Dr. Oliver. We had a company that did land development or housing development in North Minneapolis. When we were doing that, people in the city of Plymouth, they asked me, our company, to come and do the same thing in St. Paul. In Plymouth. But we chose not to do it because we wanted to do it in North Minneapolis. And the issue is this: if we don't do it in North Minneapolis, then who is going to do it? So it is our responsibility as of those who have access to resources. And in that process, we help between 18 or 20 families in North Minneapolis become homeowners.
Excuse me, Dr. B has to mute, I think. Dr. B has to mute.
I can hear you, Mr. McFarlane.
Okay, Dr. B needs to mute, I think, because we're getting echo.
Bravada, he's saying you've got to mute because I'm getting both you and you.
Oh, sorry. Okay. The reason we're able to do that was because we believe solidly in the fact that we cannot be asking other people to help our community if we are not helping our own community. So in the process of doing this housing development that we did in the early 2000s, we were able to get grants for each family that bought those houses. We took part in an activity with the city, the CBG grant with the city of Minneapolis. For each homeowner, we're able to reduce their homes by $25,000 to $35,000 each, which enable a lot of people to qualify. For example, if you're trying to buy a $215,000 home, your requirements to be able to get that home is much higher if it is $35,000 less, which means you'll be buying 180 instead of 215. It changes the dynamics. So when you move into the house, you have $35,000 of equity in that house. That's how you create wealth in the community and change people from renters to homeowners. So that's That's another aspect that we need to look at. Those of who have those kind of resources or who have those skills, we need to use those skills to better the community, not just to enrich ourselves. I'll pass on the stick to Mr. McFarlane or Dr. B.
Brother Al, you can have the stick.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to respond. Thank you, Yeli, for that comment, because that sort of is an application of the principle of equity, of engagement, and of taking accountability and responsibility for action to create wealth with intention. And I wanted to take that and also to respond to Dr. Williams about how do we do this, how do we get our people so that we all are speaking the same language or operating from the same playbook. And I think that's critical. And that's really the $64,000 question. And I think the answer is in creating processes that involve planning, institutionalizing the process of planning in our community. Let us develop a system of planning where people assemble at smaller and larger and different levels to implement or execute a protocol around planning. And the doing of that is also a training practice, right? Where we train our institutions, and through the institutions train the individuals, the families, to plan. The planning can be the tools of planning. The training can be in the tools of planning that you apply in your personal life, personal relationships, in your community life, community relationships, community goals, in your business life. But how do you create this vocabulary? It's like, how do we create a vocabulary that allows us to read what used to be in the paper every day, and that is the stock market report? Many of us bypassed that, without even looking at it, because it was a language we were unfamiliar with, so we didn't think it was worth our time. How do we reorient ourselves so that part of our daily digestible, our routine, is making some assessment, creating some awareness, reflecting where our interest and where our possibilities are in the world of transaction, in the world of finance. And I think that's happening. I think, because as I watch internet and YouTube, a lot of different people coming on with financial analysis, financial help. And the question for me is, how do we build that out and make it not just the domain of those who self-select and choose? And we have to praise them for doing that, but recognizing the benefit that they are gaining and the benefit that they can gain. How do we broaden the pathway to people understanding the importance of finance, the importance of understanding wealth, understanding capital, and how then we can use our power as consumers to direct the creation of wealth within our community. We become the solution side, or we become owners of the solution side of this equation. At present, we are presented and managed as the problem. My argument is that we don't have to say or try to deny that problems exist. We have to say, problem, let me at it. I'm going to run to it because I'm a problem solver. And I do that as a matter of business. I make my money solving problems. How do we reorient our thinking? So in the past, we have accused those who make money in our community as poverty pimps. And I reject that. I understand the frustration. Shirley, and this might be what you were talking about in some regard, about people that have been the usual suspects. But for me, the usual suspects have not been the people in our neighborhoods and our families who tried to step up and make things happen, but in the process enrich themselves. That's kind of okay from my point of view. The problem is the structural players, institutions that limit and narrowly construct a pipeline for just a few players to get in and get through, and to put them in a gatekeeper position. And that's what you're criticizing, is when they stop working to break the chains and restrictions wide open and settle for being gatekeepers and settle for what they have gained. So that's my point. how do we train? How do we institutionalize, create a process? And I think for me, I'm looking at what if we could create a planning system, promote a wide, it's like almost like Wikipedia or a wiki system where it's open architecture and anybody in our community, our family can join, and we invite people to join a planning process that has applications that are universal. Universal, I mean applications for the individual, his or her life, schedule, goal setting, assessment, but also principles that apply in how we interact, and principles that apply in community, neighborhood building, principles that apply in business and marketing, principles that apply in governance. But a planning system that in and of itself requires a training modality, and we intentionally train our entire people on the use, the acquisition, and the retention of power in the creation of wealth. That's a big idea from my point of view. And I think that part of it means that you necessarily have in this process specific deliverables, projects, businesses like Brother Yelly has described, that you declare that you will have come out of this process of engagement, and you have reporting out over time. We did this. When my business was located over in St. Paul on University Avenue, I was in a shopping center that was owned by Vietnamese merchants new to the community. And at that time, the Vietnamese people that I interacted with were talking about wanting to rebrand and rename University Avenue, that corridor, Little Saigon, because that's where the Vietnamese community was and where the emerging and newly arrived Hmong community was settling. Of course, that's where we had been for generations as Rondo. And so the idea of Rondo continued to wane, to disappear, to dissipate, and in its place, identity, nomenclature reflecting different populations, different stories. The loss of our narrative was at stake. And so, and then I had Vietnamese partners, business partners. I owned a travel agency with a Vietnamese business partner. I owned another publication, a publication for the Latino community that myself and my Vietnamese business partner created, out of which that turned into La Prensa de Minnesota. I'm the originator of La Prensa, along with my Vietnamese partner. And but I would go to the Vietnamese community meetings as his guest when they had annual meetings. And I discovered this idea, the sense that as a community, they met and articulated aspirations. That's right. That we're going to do this in the nail business. Right now, we got 100 shops. In the next year, we want to add another 20 shops in the nail business. We decided that we're going to be the preeminent, the predominant resource in that industry. And then they looked at other industries the same way. So I'm saying, yeah, that's eye-opener. It's a good thing that they're doing that. Can't we do that? Identify disciplines, industries, and ultimately it's all of them, but we start one by one or in groups and say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to have 20% control of this market in the next year, and then 30% control, so that ultimately we end up controlling our neighborhood, our community. And not only do we develop an economy that we can talk about and measure and monetize our experiences with each other, but we also look at the balance of trade between our community and the outside world and use a strategy for how do we get the money from outside of our community, inside our community, to enrich and grow our community, to create wealth in our community. I'm going to stop there and pass the talking stick back to Sherlyn.
Okay. I'm going to say this. I'm going to be short and sweet. There's a group of us called Black Women Rising here in the metro area. And we believe that because of, no offense, guys, because of the, I want to say paternalism that exists in the society, in particular here in the metro area. I'm from Chicago, and a lot of us in this organization are from elsewhere, where women have more of a voice and more of a power. So we're not used to sitting back and saying, okay, that's not us. And we have a West Metro group. So we're organized all over the Metro, and we meet monthly. And we believe that women should be leading most things. Just as in Germany, you had a woman who was leading that country and they did quite well. And you had Margaret Thatcher, and you had, Madam Sirleaf in Liberia. I say all of this to say women should be in leadership roles. We don't need to ask permission. We need to just move in and take it. Now, as far as the economic part, I'm from Chicago. Ariel Investments, I think George Lucas's wife is now the CFO. But for years, I think in the early 2000s, they would give back then $20,000 a year to inner city school. I forget the name of it. Now it's called Ariel. And at first grade, they would give each class $20,000. They would also send some of their financial people in to educate those kids. And those kids would invest that 20. By the end of when it was time to graduate, oh my God, they would have made all kinds of money. And they were knowledgeable, and they determined based on the knowledge of what investments to make, when to sell, trade, or whatever, what to do with it at graduation. And many of them decided to go to college with the funds and things like that. But even after that, some of them were able to buy their parents a car, a house. That's how much money they made. So what if these financial companies we have here, and we have quite a few, what if they in first grade invested, and at the end of that time allowed those students to decide what to do with that money? They vote on it. We're going to go to school. We're going to invest in this. What if the education started at grade 1? I mean, kids are brilliant, but they can't learn what they aren't taught. And they can't learn to invest and manipulate money if they were never given the opportunity. So having known about Ariel and that success, I've been talking about this for years, and it's not happened here. I'll be 70 tomorrow, but I don't think like a 70-year-old, okay? And I got a lot of friends who are younger than me and all ages. I like to see change yesterday. And I think when I say all of the usual suspects, yes, they are place keepers. They're not wanting to have a meeting to discuss how to disperse or share power and position. And I don't care to meet with them anyway, because just as Frantz Fanon and the rest of them said, if you want some power, you better go get it. And the women in our organization, we realized that to the umpteenth. And most of them are younger than me, that we're going to have to take the power, and we're going to have to educate the women younger than us that we do not have to ask permission. We do not need a man to hold our coat, because they're not going to do it, and we sure not going to hold theirs anymore. We don't need them to tell us it's okay to assume power or position. We're just going to move into our role. If you have the intellect, the ability, the know-how, then you should be in control and don't ask permission. So trying to get women to understand that we're not second class, we're born leaders, let's lead. And yes, all the little usual suspects do not like that. But guess what? We don't care. We're not asking permission. So that's what I got to say. I will pass the talking stick back to another woman. No, I'm going to give it to Dr. Williams. I just did that to play with you.
Yeah, I'm immune. The thing is that I think that women shouldn't have to ask permission. But the thing that we have to do collectively, I think, in 2021 and beyond, is to recognize the landmines that are there that get in the way of women participating, and the fact that we have to develop a different sensibility associated with it, and not see it as a threat and a discomfort in different ways. You know, it is interesting to me. How do we end up seeing ourselves as either friends or foe? Living in different communities, including the Twin Cities. The thing that may come up is that people may be perceived as either heroes or villains, even when we may not know who those people are. And have a history of those folks and what they can contribute and what their intentions are. And on the one hand, there may be something where somebody is either a hero or a villain, but the question is, how do we make those judgments? And is it possible to give people some level of grace as we engage with them to get to know them? There are some people I know that have been the gatekeepers for a long time, and some people that have been their mentees, I guess, that have come through and done a really, really good job in engaging the community and being seen as a leader within the community. And I appreciate that as well. But the question is, how do we end up doing something where we don't automatically challenge people who can be contributors? And that's the question, and I'll give it back to the wise people in the room. So, Dr. B and Mr. McFarlane and Yeli and Sherilyn, I'd be interested in your thoughts about that.
I'd like to jump in with that because one of the first things I think that we need to think about are the principles that guide us as a people. The principle of Ujamaa, where it means cooperative economics. So when we have cooperative economics, that means everybody collectively share in the outcome of their energies and their resources and their treasures. So when we come together, if we remember that our strengths are doing things together, just like when my sister Sherilyn was talking about Black Women Rising, or it could have been Delta Sigma Theta, or it could have been AKAs, or Zeta Phi Beta. It could have been any group of people who have a common vision. And to me, the common vision is our spiritual, psychological, financial, physical liberation. That's the business that we're about. So how can we get that going? We need to have the parents to teach it to themselves, and then they model and teach it to their children. So I talk about that boot camp I have, Project Marua, premeditated parenting boot camp. But what makes it so powerful is that the parents have to check themselves first, and then they go back to teach their children. Because if you've got a bad habit and you tell Johnny, when you go to school, don't let anybody take your lunch money, you better beat them up, then Johnny's going to beat him up, get suspended. You're going to lose your job because you have to come off work to come up to the school to pick them up and bring them back when they come back to school. So the economic perspective is really critical for us to have as a people, recognizing if we do share our economic gifts, and that doesn't just mean money. Time is just as valuable as money. And if you share your time, then and your gifts and bring them together, then that's when we will realize there's plenty of room at the table for anybody else who wants to help. It's like a potluck. The more people come, the better the food. So I'm going to pass the stick. Yelly, did you want to say one final thing and then we'll close up with Mr. McFarlane?
Planning, it's one thing, and being able to execute the plan, it's a totally different thing.
You're not on mute, are you?
No. I am. As a planning, it's one thing, and being able to execute the plan, it's another thing. Of all the ethnic groups in the United States,
Dr. B, mute, please.
And please, I want anybody to correct me. We are the most
Gifted. Yeah,
Not only
divine.
are we the most gifted, but we are the least effective when it comes to impacting our social our social environment, because we really don't believe in participating. And those people that participate, we tend to basically look down upon them. If I have a magic wand, all I want is to increase participation in politics and being able to make change in the Black community by 100%. And if we do that, I believe we'll be able to go to the next level. And I'm going to leave it like as that. Mr. McFarlane, I'm passing on the stick to you.
Yeah, thank you, Brother Yelly. Guess what? We're out of time. It's 2:00. It's been an hour that's gone so quickly, but this has been a rich conversation. And I want to thank all of you. Thanks to those who are monitoring the program on YouTube or on Facebook at Black Press of America, or on the McFarlane Media Facebook channels. Again, thank you all for sharing. I think 45 people shared this feed during the course of this conversation. And we want to just grow that every time we get together. Let's build a connection with each other that is significant and that can sustain us all in our vision, our work, and in our dedication to, again, being the authors of the future. We want to remind everybody, I'm going to ask Dr. B to close this really with an instruction about COVID-19. I think it's always appropriate to remind our people to pay attention to the protocols and to the science, and to act in ways that are responsible to save your life and the lives of those around you. Dr. B, we'll close with your comments.
I just want everybody to know that the Delta virus is still out there, and we don't need to be an enemy to ourselves. COVID can kill you. Wearing a mask won't. It won't kill your brothers and sisters to wear a mask. And with that, I say, see you next time.
And we'll see you all next time. Take care. I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversation.
Oh, Queen Justice, where are you? Did they beat you up or no? Lock you on the ground, take the crown away from you?
Oh, Lady Liberty, red, white, and blue. Did they take your dignity with their bigotry? Teach you that you're born to lose.
Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
of all the rules you break.
We've had enough
of all the money you make.
We've had enough.
No more life at stake.
We've had enough.
This is a proclamation.
It's been 400 years and we're 400 late. Together we stand from state to state. Going back in time won't make America great. We need justice now, people won't wait.
Action, no more distraction. Every step we take, we gain traction. If it can happen to one, it can happen to all. United we stand, divided we fall. Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
of all the rules you were breaking.
We had enough
of all the money you were making.
We had enough.
No more life gets taken.
We had enough.
This is a proclamation.
Free or guilty,
it's gonna get filthy.
You better believe, just roll up your sleeves.
It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
of all the rules you're breaking.
We had enough.
All the money you're making.
We've had enough.
No more life gets taken.
We've had enough.
This is the